So I'm going to be talking tonight about libraries, but first I want to give a little story actually about travel agencies. So every week when I go grocery shopping with my husband, we always pass by this little office that has a travel agency in it. And every time we passed it by for a long time, I would always think to myself, how are they still in business? Because nowadays we have Expedia, we have hotel websites, airline websites, people can just do their own bookings. What do they really need a travel agency for? And it wasn't until recently that I found out that not only are they still in business, but they're actually thriving. They've just changed their focus a little bit. Because now people can do their own basic bookings. So if they just want to book a hotel stay or they just want to make a flight reservation, they can do that. But if they, for example, want to have a trip planned where someone else does all the planning, someone else does the car rental, the flight, the hotel, the activities, and plans everything, that's what they would call the travel agency for. So in a way, that's similar to what has happened with libraries, as you'll see. So when you think about libraries, you probably automatically think of books and people studying in a quiet room, and that is part of it. Libraries do still have books. There is still an audience for that, even though there is so much online and there are e-books. But there is still an audience for physical paper, hard copy books for a couple different reasons. Some people maybe just prefer the tactile feeling of turning the page and having the book in their hand. Some people maybe just prefer to look at something that's not a screen, especially if maybe they're looking at a screen all day at work. Also, not everything that's been published in book form is necessarily available online to read. So if you have something that was published before 1923, those are all in the public domain. So that's why you can usually find a lot of classic literature online. If you want to read an older book, you can usually find it. But things that were published after that date are usually still under copyright. So for example, if you go to Google and you type in Stephen King, you're not really necessarily going to find his latest book in full text for you to read on the internet. You could probably buy it from the Amazon Kindle store, and if you have the technical know-how, you probably could find other means to acquire the book. But for the general public, most people aren't going to be able to find it that way. So just keeping with the books theme, even if libraries only provided books alone, for me, that's a huge benefit. So I did a little nerdy chart here showing actually what I borrowed from the library last year. So even aside from the fact that I am a librarian, I'm also a big user of the libraries just because I love to read. And I went and took a look at what money I actually saved by getting them from the library. So I borrowed one ebook from the library in 2016, which I just got off the library website and read on my tablet, and that saved me $14.99. I borrowed 8 audiobooks from the library, which I was also able to download through their website and listen to on my phone. That saved me $183.28. I borrowed 31 paper books from the library, which saved me $323. So really, all in all, it saved me over $500 in a single year, which I think for taxpayer money was a pretty good return on investment. But again, don't want to make it seem like it's just all about books, because there are certainly plenty of other things you can borrow at the library these days. And I mean all types of libraries. So we have public libraries, school libraries, college and university libraries, museums and other organizations have their own libraries too. So there really is a lot that you can get from them. So as I did, ebooks borrowed from the library website. You can also, from some libraries, borrow technology equipment like a Raspberry Pi or a Wi-Fi hotspot, even recording equipment, museum passes, musical instruments, hardware tools, and seeds. And this technically is considered borrowing because the idea is that you take the seeds, you grow your plant, the next year you take some of those seeds from it and you bring it back to the library for the next person to borrow. So even aside from borrowing physical objects, there are still more things that libraries have to offer within the building. You have, of course, free meeting rooms for your club or organization. Many of them have maker spaces with 3D printers. Some have recording studios with green screens and editing equipment that you can use. And classes on just about every topic you can think of. Classes on Microsoft Word or different kinds of software, yoga, English as a second language, and public speaking. And of course, free Wi-Fi, and you don't even need to buy a cup of coffee in order to use it. Just walk in, sit down, and you can start using the Wi-Fi. It's not even just the Wi-Fi, but also the computers to use it on. You can go into the library, you sit down, use their networked computer, which often has extra software on it that you can use. So some of you may be thinking, well, that's not really relevant to me because I have internet access at home, I have my own computer, I don't really need that. And that's what we call the digital divide. And that's the idea that there are some people who have very readily available broadband internet, multiple devices to use it on, and maybe even you could say take it for granted because it almost is today, the internet almost is considered like a utility. But there is still a sizable population of people that don't have internet access. Maybe they only have internet access through a smartphone, or maybe they don't even have that. So there was a study done by the Pew Internet Research Center in November 2016, so just under a year ago, and they found that in suburban areas, 76% of the population has access to broadband internet. In urban areas, it's 73%. So those numbers may sound pretty good on the one hand, until you consider the flip side that that means that 1 in 4 people still doesn't have it. So this service that we consider to almost be a utility these days, there are still 1 in 4 people in those areas that don't have it. In rural areas, it's even less. 63% of people have broadband internet, or then if you look at it from the other side, it's about 1/3 of the people who don't. Usually in the urban and suburban areas, the main reason that someone wouldn't have broadband is usually because they can't afford it. In the rural areas, most likely the reason is because those areas are more sparsely populated. So a lot of the big internet service providers don't really find it financially worthwhile to provide much service in those areas. But whatever the reason is, these people then have a resource in their library where they can use their Wi-Fi, use their internet access, even use their computers if they need it. And if you need it, the librarians can actually sit down with you and show you how to use it. So in public libraries, you'll see librarians sitting down with people, helping them fill out job applications, helping them use different kinds of software on the computer, helping them type letters or documents. So even if you personally are not benefiting from this aspect of libraries, your community at large really is. So in this way, supporting your library is really supporting your whole community. But let's get back to the idea about what's online and what libraries still have to offer, even though there's so much information online. Well, let's think about how did a lot of this information get online. You may have heard of the Google Books project, which is a program where Google set out to scan hundreds of thousands of books and put them online freely available. So some of them, the public domain ones mostly, are completely available online, and some of them are just available like in a preview version where you can at least read a few pages, maybe do some searches in the book to find where certain words or phrases are mentioned. Where did all those books come from? So let's take a look at this one here. If we look at the back cover, and then we zoom in on it a little bit, so this book came from the medical library at Stanford. So when Google was looking to digitize all of these hundreds of thousands of books, they weren't going to the publishers, because in many cases, with many of the books being older, the publishers themselves didn't even have copies of these books anymore. But the libraries did, and that's where the bulk of the books for the Google Books project came from. And libraries themselves are also putting a lot online today in what we call digital collections. And this is where libraries take items from their archives and special collections, things like letters, photographs, maps, documents, things with historical and cultural significance, and are scanning them or taking photos of them and putting them online, which is really broadening their audience. So previously, if your library had some kind of interesting historical photos or documents, you would have to, 1, know that they exist, and 2, go in person to the library to check them out. And now anybody who has internet access can go look at the library's website and check out these resources on a worldwide scale. You don't have to live in the area where the library is located. And also, many libraries have partnered together in regional or statewide groups, such as New York Heritage, which is a website of digital collections altogether from different libraries across the state. And you can look at scans of high school yearbooks or maps from the Holland Land Company, and you can browse and search and find results from multiple libraries. Then these regional and statewide groups partnered together and formed the Digital Public Library of America, which is a national website that has all of these digital collections there. So you can, again, browse, search for any kind of cultural and historical topic and find information from many different libraries. But what I want to talk about now is, for me, what I think is the big deal with libraries today, the big service that we provide, is the ability to navigate information. But 30 years ago, librarians were more like gatekeepers, where if you wanted even like a basic piece of information, like what time is it in London, England right now, or who has the world record for the 100-meter dash, you would either have to have a set of encyclopedias in your house that you could look it up in, or you would go to the library. But nowadays, thanks to the internet, we're not gatekeepers anymore. The gates have been blown wide open, and it's sort of switched a bit. So now, instead of us being like people who would grant access to like a scarce resource, this limited supply of information, now we're helping you find your way through too much information and helping you sort of narrow down what you're looking for, filtering out what's irrelevant or inaccurate. And this was summarized really nicely in a quote a few years ago by author Neil Gaiman when he was the chairman of National Library Week. He said, "Google can bring you back 100,000 answers. A librarian can bring you back the right one." And I think maybe even 100,000 answers was probably still a conservative estimate, just with the sheer amount of information that we have today. There's one statistic that says that the human race, every single day, is producing 2.5 exabytes of data, which could also be seen as 2.5 billion gigabytes, or this many bytes. So there is really a need today for what we call information literacy, which is the ability to look at a piece of information and think critically about it, about whether or not it's relevant to what you're looking for, whether it's accurate, whether it's written with a bias or not. And I'm sure we've all seen situations where a friend or family member maybe posts some information that they found online, posts a link to an article or some information that we know, looking at it, we know that that's not entirely true, or maybe it's flat out 100% false. But I think a lot of people today, it's very easy to just sort of believe what you read online and not really stop to think about it. There is an exception, though. There is one day out of every year when people do stop to think about what they are reading online and do think about it critically and stop and think, is this true? Think about what day could that be? April 1st. That is the one day that people stop to think about what they read. So we just need to work on the other 364 days. So you can anytime go to your local library and ask them for help finding information on a topic. They're not just there to check out your books. So if you're in college, even if your professor has already given you the instructions on how to do a term paper, you can still go to the librarian and ask them, can you help me find articles on my topic? Or you can go and ask in your public library, you can say, like, my landlord wants to kick me out of my apartment because my dog is barking too much. Can you do that? And the librarian can help you look up the local tenant law to find out if that is true. Or you can say, I'm doing some genealogy research. Can you help me find information about this certain ancestor? And they can help you with that. Or even, I was doing this Google search and I came across what looks like a really great journal article that would answer my question, but the website wants to charge me money for it. So this is a really good question to ask your local librarian. So if you ever come across a website that wants to charge you money for an article that you want to read, take down that information, give it to your local librarian, and I guarantee you 9 times out of 10 they will get you that article for free. Because either that library already has access to that article through an online database subscription, or if not, they will find a library that does, and then they can get you that article. And you don't even need to necessarily always go into the library to ask your questions. Many libraries have chat programs on their website where you can type in your question and have your question answered by a librarian over the computer. And again, many libraries have partnered together, there's that word again, they've partnered together to provide chat services that are even staffed 24 hours a day so that you can have your question answered any time of day or night. So in the same way that Expedia has freed up travel agencies to take on more complex work, Google has freed up libraries to take on more complex work. So now you can go to Google and ask, what time is it in London, England, or who has the world record for the 100-meter dash? But you would go to a librarian to ask, I want to start a business, but I don't know if this is something that's needed in my community, or maybe if someone else is already doing it. Or if you want to ask, I'm researching this controversial topic and I need help finding information from both sides of the issue. Can you help me? And they'll help you with that. So if you think about it, why do we still need libraries even though we already have Google? The same reason that we still need doctors even though we have WebMD. And I'd like to close with a quote that was pretty popular among librarians a few years ago when it was printed in an American Libraries newsletter, but I found out that it was actually originally from a Norwegian publication, quoting a professor, John Bing, professor of information technology law, and he said, "To ask why we still need libraries when there is so much information available elsewhere is about as sensible as asking, why do we still need roadmaps, even though there are so very many roads?" Thank you.